All right, guys, today I'm going to showcase a couple different things for you. So if this seems all over the place, it's probably because it is. So we're going to try out a couple different things. We're going to go over some different filters and textures. We're going to go over gradients and how I like to create them. Two different ways of doing it, really. And then we'll talk about text really briefly, and then just a couple other things to finish this guy up. So also, just to clarify this for you guys, this sort of collage that I've been making here is purely for demo purposes. I'm not expecting you guys to create something that necessarily looks similar or is using similar things. This is just the demo materials that I use for this course and for some of my other courses. So if it seems unrelated to the theme of our collage, that's because it is. So I would not necessarily use this as a leaping off point for what you guys should be making. And then also, just so everyone is aware, I did push back the deadline on that so that you guys can have some more time. You're making two pieces. I want you guys to make something that you like. So, take some time on it and consider what you're making. So don't stress about it. So we'll just jump in for that today. So I've added a couple other things. This is just a little group folder of some hastily cut out little rhinestones and gems that I've put, again, together in a group so that it doesn't look as chaotic and cluttered as this would. Um, if you need help creating a group, just go back in one of our previous videos. You would just select all the layers that you want to be in a group and then control click and create a new group from them. So what we are going to end up doing here today is adding in some text. Again, working with some gradients and different fun filters and textures that people like. So the first thing we want to do to start out with those filters, I particularly want to place them over our pairs in question at the moment. I maybe in certain elements of your collage or any works that you make really digitally going forward in Photoshop, maybe you don't want it to look exactly like a real photo, or maybe you want there to be some sort of cool overlay. So we're going to talk about the filter gallery and how to do that. Photoshop is kind of known for its filters. You can get them to do a lot of cool things. So there are two ways to really make use of filters. One is going to be to go up to the very top, your finder bar that says filter. And then with an image layer selected or a compatible layer, really, you're going to go to filter. And there are a couple different ones here. So the add noise filter is a favorite. People love to add noise over things. I'll show you guys that in just a moment. Pixelate, some of these are great. I'm particularly fond of the mosaic filter. I'll show you guys that one in a second. The blur filters are great. All of them are really great, but some of them can lean a little bit cheesier than others. So I would be super wary of some of these ones under stylize, oil paint, emboss, etc. There are great ways to use these. I've seen them used to great effect before, but it's really easy to have them look a little bit corny or kind of kitschy in a bad way. So just be wary of some of these, but test them out, play around with them, have fun. The one thing that I really want to make a point of is the filter gallery right here. So our filters, and I guess the best way to demonstrate this is maybe just with a standard filter on our pairs here. Pretty severe, can also be on the subtler end of things. Once you add a filter, similar to what we've been observing in the past with a lot of things in Photoshop, there's an editable way of doing things, and there's a way that's going to be a little bit more difficult to consistently work with and keep coming back to. And so I find that a lot of these filters can be a little bit frustrating to work with in the sense that I applied my noise filter. If I keep clicking things, again, like I've been saying throughout our tutorials, I'm going to lose the ability to keep editing that noise filter if I impose it this way with filter, noise, add noise, or any of these in this sort of grouping here. You can't keep editing them, and that can get a little bit frustrating, especially if you want to have the ability to go back an hour after you've been working and, keep fussing with it. So I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to show you the way around that. So the first thing you're going to want to do is take the layer, image, what have you, that you want to pass the filter over, and you're going to control click it. on the layer itself, of course. And then you're going to convert it to a smart object. We talked about smart objects really briefly, I believe, in our first tutorial about how they will link to a separate file. We're not necessarily using it to do that. We are just using it so that we can enter our filter gallery and then have these filters that we impose on it still be editable after the fact. So I'm going to zoom out of this a little bit. You'll notice the filter gallery here does have a grain effect. So for our first example that we'll do for a filter, we're just going to put on the grain effect and we will keep working with this. So I'm going to turn down the intensity just a little bit. You can turn up the contrast of the image, change the grain type, etc. We're just going to keep it simple for now. Why might you want to use grain? Right now, it's a very popular, trendy, stylistic thing to use. It adds this sort of nice textural grittiness that can be fun. On the subtler end of things, it can just add a little bit more visual intrigue. On the more severe end of things, you can start to emulate old film photography, which would naturally have a grain to it just by the nature of the process. It's a really great, I love green. It's really, really fun. And I think it's also a way to sort of like instantly unify a bunch of elements if you're imposing grain over your whole collage. It'll blend things together really nicely. So we're just gonna use this for now. The nice thing is you can sort of turn it off or invisible or visible, and you can stack a lot of these effects. So I'm not going to do that for this round just to keep things simple, but you'll notice this little plus button down here. You can add a new effect layer, and so you can keep stacking these, which is really great. So I'm going to go hit OK on this, and you'll notice I now have my grain on these pairs, but I've also been given this kind of sub layer here with my smart filters, where I am able to now, if my computer wasn't being a little concerningly slow, I can double click back on that filter gallery layer or sub layer, and I can keep editing this. So if I'm like, oops, that green was a little too severe the first time I put it on there, I can just keep fussing with it, or maybe double click it. I want it to be more severe. So that's how you can kind of get continuously editable filters. It's really great. And they will all stack. So if I go back into my filter gallery and I hit the plus and I go in and add some new thing, I hate that, but if I added it, now these are all stacked and I can, again, still just double click on it, add it. I hate that, so I'm going to remove it. Simple as that. So that's really great, and that's an easy first demonstration of our grain filter. You'll notice this is applying layer by layer by layer. So if you wanted to apply it over everything, you could either do that layer by layer by layer, or I'll show you a technique at the end to get grain over every single thing in your image, or how I like to do it with kind of no muss, no fuss. So I'm going to go back into this filter gallery. That's grain, been there, done that. So I'm going to go in and change to a couple of my other favorite filters. I can't cover all of these, or I could, but this would be an obscenely long and kind of unnecessary video. So I would highly suggest you just play around with this on your own, but I will go over some of my favorites to be using. So under, let's see, sketch, I'm going to select halftone pattern. This is going to, well, I'm going to back out of this first. When you're selecting halftone, you want to make sure that if you want it to be a black and white halftone, that you're going to make sure your main colors are black and white for this. Otherwise, it's going to take and make the halftone off of whatever colors you have as your foreground and background color here. So I'm going to go back into the filter gallery now that that's correct. Go over to sketch. I guess it's just going to do this. Fine, whatever. I can change the size of the dots that I'm working with and then change how contrasty they are. And then I can impose this. And you'll notice these two sliders play really well together, where the more contrasty it is, the more kind of you're relying on. And the more you're relying on like the underlying photo, so to speak. I want these to have relatively crisp edges though, so I'm gonna kind of try to pull this back a little. And then you can also have different types of halftones here. Sorry, the yellow is super distracting, but dot pattern, hit OK. And then this, it's really frustrating that this is all yellow. Um, but it's fine. We'll work around it. So in this filter gallery here, again, can turn it off and turn it on. This will also be able to be affected by the levels that are working with this. So if I want to pull more detail or less detail out of this, I certainly can while I'm working with it. And the reason I'm like mildly perturbed by the yellow, but not super perturbed by it, is that I'm immediately also just going to place a gradient map over this for our little next technique that we're going to show. So temporarily, I'll hide all of our extra little things just to show how this works. And I'm going to quickly adjust the color of my halftone. So if it's ever causing you trouble for a reason that you can't quite determine, or you don't have enough time to determine, or something like that, you can really easily just place a little gradient up over it. So I'm going to go to my adjustment layers, which we talked about last video, down here, and scroll down to the bottom. I'm going to click gradient map. Easy peasy, now it's all black and white. So really, really great. I had my foreground and background colors set to black and white. Simple as that. Now my halftone is in black and white too. But this also means with my gradient map that I could sort of force it into other color ranges if I wanted to. Gradient maps are some of my favorite techniques in Photoshop. Whenever you're thinking of like a maybe two-color print or kind of two-color look, which is shown in that little blend mode presentation that's on Canvas under Monday. You can create really cool limited color palettes with this. So I'm going to, in my properties panel over here, click on this, click on this, my gradient map editor here. And so the more that I pull these sliders around, I can force it into less detail, more detail, different variations of color, etc. But that also means that I can, take the sky and force it into a different range of colors. So selecting black here, I can force it into red, and I will pull this back a little bit. This middle diamond in here is going to be, whoa, clicking wildly, is going to be how like harsh that transition between red and pink is, or red and white, I should say. So more pink in the middle, etc. The other thing that this is going to work really nicely with is if I go in and I edit this photo itself. So if I end up imposing a different sort of level adjustment on this, where it has a little bit of a harsher sort of pull between things, I can get this to kind of react in a different way, and then I will turn my smart filter back on. So you can kind of play around with adjusting these and seeing how it works and how much detail you can kind of pull out. You can also just go back to editing the actual image itself. So if I turn my filter gallery off, if I make this super, super, super contrasty as far as images go, you can kind of get different effects out of it. The other thing that's going to be interesting about gradient maps, if I turn my smart filter back on, is if I just simply pull this up and flip these, it'll look entirely different. And I can kind of, change around where exactly this is coming in. And then again, I can sort of fuss with the levels until it is going to like behave in exactly the way that I want it to. The more contrasty, like I said, the more contrasty an image is, the better this is going to work out. But gradient map, really quickly, you can kind of impose an interesting stylistic effect on top of stuff. This automatically was clipping masked to the layers underneath it. However, if I didn't do that, so if I were to remove or release the clipping mask on this, everything underneath it is going to be affected by that gradient map, just so that people are aware. So that also means that this current like black layer is getting the sort of white part of the gradient map imposed over it. So if I were to flip that, go onto my background layer that is black, and then fill it with the opposite color, that should be rendered as completely red. So just to give you an idea of how those gradient maps work. Again, I don't really particularly want this to be all affected by the gradient map, so I'm just going to clipping mask it again, hold down Option in between those layers or Control click, and just hit Create Clipping Mask. And now that problem is totally solved. I'm going to go ahead and change my background layer to something that is maybe a little bit more fun. And then I'm going to go ahead and change how some of these stickers look as well. So I'm going to go ahead and Control click this. And actually, I don't need to do this step because these are already smart objects. So you can tell it's a smart object by looking at the little icon that's in the bottom right-hand corner of this layer. If you hover over it, smart object thumbnail means you're good to go for this. And again, I'm just going to go up to my filter, hit filter gallery on this layer. It's going to show you the whole image without the mask. It's pretty fun. And I'm quite bothered by it imposing those colors on top of things. So we're going to try again. There we go. And so now I have this halftone pattern. What I'm really looking at is how this particular sticker is going to turn out. So we will kind of pull things in and around until that particular one is going to work. Good enough for me. So then I'm going to hit OK on that. And then same thing with our big sales sticker. So let's do filter gallery on that. And this is an interesting case where I might actually want to invert this because these letters are going to be quite hard to read. So I'm going to try, let's see how this goes. I don't know if this is necessarily going to do what I want to do, but that's the beauty of Photoshop. It doesn't really matter. Actually, we're going to try something different. So I'm going to cancel this. I'm going to select that entire sticker, and then I'm going to sort of deselect if it's going to let me and cooperate. Actually, maybe we'll do selective color. So let's do select color range. This is a really great tool if you're looking for a very particular set of colors. It lets you use an eyedrop tool so that you can just select that range. And that's going to be good enough for these purposes, I think. So it's not flawless, but you'll notice it picked up some of those edges there. But it did get my letters, which is what I really care about. And now I can just take my lasso maybe and remove this section here that I don't want. And so what I'm hoping to do here is just invert just this section so that the letters can stand out a little bit more. If this is working the way I was hoping, let's see. If this is working the way I'm hoping, then I can maybe adjust. Let's see. Maybe we'll do just this. Oop. Hop back into the filters for this whole thing. Let's see what we can get. Oops. The black and white thing is really causing a fuss. Let's do filter gallery again. That inversion is not going to suit me that well. So what we're going to do instead here is I'm going to go into image adjustments, and I am going to really just punch how contrasty this is so that I can get a little bit more, or maybe pull that back a little bit. This is the best exploratory part of Photoshop. It's just trying to figure out how to get it to do what you want. So I'm going to pull this a little. What I really want is just the letters to stand out a little bit more. I don't need the colors to be perfectly on point because it doesn't quite matter. Let's see what we can get. And this will benefit from a smaller halftone pattern. Works. That's good enough for me. So now we have, again, all of these little different smart filters over things. I'm going to go ahead and change the color of these stickers, maybe just by imposing, again, a sort of gradient map on top of them. So I'm going to go back to my adjustment layers down here. I'm going to hit gradient map. And again, this is going to go over the top of the entire thing, so bear with that for just a moment. I'm going to click on my gradient over here, and I'm going to select some sort of color that's going to work for whatever I want. We have red, we have blue. Let's do really kind of punchy orange. And you can do duotone gradient maps. So if I wanted to, I could pull this into another kind of blue direction, make it seem like it's a little bit transparent. Or I could copy the exact color value from this, but I don't super care to do that right now. And so now I will, actually maybe I do. Hide my gradient map, double click on this, eyedropper this, and copy my values. I will go back in to my gradient map, and I will just make sure that this final color value here is matching my background color. And then I'm going to clipping mask it to the exact thing underneath. Over here with my big sale sticker, I'm going to just copy the same gradient map because I like it. So I'm just going to drag it to this duplicate plus button down here, and then I will drag it on top of big sale, and I will clipping mask it to that layer, and that will work. Up here with the pears, they're not standing out enough for me. So what I want to do is I'm just going to end up deleting this filter mask here first, clear all the smart filters. And I want to fix this a little bit. It's not doing it for me anymore. So I'm going to hide our gradient map, and I'm going to go back into our levels and try to get it to behave the way that I want a little bit more. And then making sure that my colors, again, are fully reset. Let's give it another go. We're going to go back into filter, filter gallery. This one is just being too darn much. Okay. Perfect. There we go. So size of my dots, contrast. I want this to be pretty darn contrasty. And I want not a crazy big halftone effect, but something that's noticeable. Let's see. That'll work. And again, I can keep editing this, so I'm not super stressed about it being perfect this time. I can use my levels again to give it just a little bit more punch, and now I can turn my gradient map back on and swap my colors. I quite like that shade of orange I have initially. So I think I'm just going to end up, but I do love a red color scheme. We're going to keep it red for now. See where we go, see where Photoshop takes us. So now that these are behaving themselves, I will turn our background layer back on. And now I'm just going to start adding in some type. So just to go over filter galleries again after my meandering exploration, just with our pear layer, these filter galleries are really fabulous and really fun. So if I go back in here, this is obviously just halftones, but there's a ton of other stuff that you can end up doing. Stamp cutout, photocopy, graphic pen, chrome. Torn edges is going to kind of be similar to that threshold effect that everybody really likes. I'll show you guys the torn edges example really quickly. Torn edges I think works really well if you also end up getting it to a good kind of like mid-tone place, like this. And then there's another sort of tool that you can add to the torn edges or, so to speak, threshold filter, and that's going to be your, let's find it, your dodge and your burn tool. Dodge is going to bring out, and it's going to have to rasterize it before you do this, so it can be a little bit funky. So I would maybe add it as a duplicate layer, but you can basically like have, let's see, or maybe I'll open up another file that has that in it. You can basically take the photo layer underneath and like paint in new areas of detail. So I'll show you guys that one in a separate video maybe. Over here, we will go back with our gradient map. Pull back in to make this a little bit more severe. So now we'll go in and add our type. For type, I'm just going to go ahead and add a whole new layer on top. You guys don't have to mess around with type if you don't want to. I just want to show you guys all the tools that are at your disposal. Type is really, really simple. You're just going to drag out a text box. Type in whatever you want in here. Whatever fonts you have on your computer are what you're going to have access to, but through Adobe Creative Cloud, you guys also have access to Adobe Fonts. So I would highly recommend you take a look at that. I can also give you a quick run through of that at the very end of this. I'm just not going to do a full typography run through because this is a introduction class for digital art. So you don't need to know the super nitty gritty of it. I'm going to pick a fun font that I like. This is where you can scale things up. You can also scale things up using your transformation tools. This is going to have your alignment, color. This is going to be warps. If you would like to warp text, you can play around with it that way. And then you're going to have typographic tools here. If this feels relevant to you and you're into typography or design, you will know who you are. Follow your heart on that one. I'm just not going to go through it for this particular course. Going to go ahead and grab this here. This text box is how you can transform things once you click on it. And then the text layer, opening my layers panel back up, is going to work the same as all of your other layers. So if I go in and rearrange like so, you can have certain elements overlapping, etc. You can have as many lines of text as you want. If the spacing here is not working for you, I would just put it into a separate box and then move it around. I'm going to use typographic tools. You guys absolutely do not have to do that. That's just because I am a design person by nature. Let's see. Again, you can fully take this and change your type to behave in whatever way you so choose. I might also go back into my layers over here and alter the gradient map that's going on here. Pull this over to be black. And also go in for my filter gallery. Fuss around with this guy a little bit. For the actual image itself, might make it brighter so that this reads a little bit more naturally. And then I'll do the same thing with the Del Monte sticker over here. Again, going to my gradient map, double clicking on the gradient map, and then I'm just going to select my main color. And again, this is also looking a little bit intense. I'm just going to go image, adjustment, brightness, contrast, and brighten this up. You can keep repeating that process if brightness contrast, like when you're topping this out, is not doing enough for you. You can keep pulling it around until it feels right. And again, all of this is starting to look a little bit crazy as I move through this. So I might want to start doing some grouping here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab all of my layers right here, and I will control click it. I will hit new group from layers, name it stickers. Now that is nice and condensed. My text, I know that it's text. It says pairs, pairs, so we're good. I will go ahead and grab this. Even though it's just a couple layers, might as well just do it for posterity's sake. Pairs. And so now all of this is nice, organized. I can kind of keep track of things. I will bring back some of my gemstones. And then I'm just going to make all of these black and white, I think, for now. Yeah, let's do that. So I'm just going to one by one go image adjustments, black and white here. We can hit auto and see how it's going to behave, but it's not really doing the best, most contrasty thing. So again, I think auto might not be your best friend. The way I know how to adjust this manually is just to look at the color that this little gemstone is naturally. It was in the pink kind of range of things. And so I'm just going to pull the red slider, or you could try the magenta slider, but that's not quite right. So you'll pull some sort of similar colored slider around until it's going to behave in the way you want. So this one over here, if I go image adjustments, black and white, hitting auto, I should be able to take the yellow part here. Let's see what we can get. And then same thing for this one, if I go image adjustments, black and white, red is going to overall darken it. But magenta will pull it back into kind of that sparkly territory. Let's select this one, image, adjustments, whoops, not photo filter, image, adjustments, black and white. Yellow is going to overall make the whole thing darker, and then red, because some of those highlights are red, I can like pull or push them into that mid-tone area. So it's really just about looking at what colors you have. This one is a little bit more of a yellow-green tone, so we'll see what I can get with this. Let's go image adjustments, black and white. Pull the yellow. That maybe that looks the most sparkly. So, and then this one over here, if it's not working for me, I can again just adjust the contrast of it maybe to get it more into that sparkly territory. If I was really looking at the composition of this image also, I might want to include another sort of sticker or something happening down here, just because this section, very top heavy, and this is feeling, at least down here, quite empty. So I might do that really, really quickly. So let's close our little gems folder. I'm going to open Finder, and I will just pull back my stickers file. Resize it so that these are pretty workable. And then let's find one that I want. Let's see which one's fun. I'm gonna do this little chill and peel one also because it's a pair, so I feel like that works. So I'm just gonna mask this out. So I'm gonna grab a selection tool just to show you guys how quick it can really be. Select this. It doesn't have to be perfect also because I'm going to push it through a halftone. I will mask it. I'm going to drag this into place, hit Command T to free transform, and then scale this up until I feel like it takes up a good section. I like that we can see the Asian pear part. I might take this little guy and move it just so things are not getting like uber congested. And then I'm going to take this again. I will, let's see, what should be our order of operations for this? I'm going to take it. It's already a smart object, so I'm going to go filter, filter gallery, whoop, halftone pattern. Zoom out a little bit so I can see exactly what we're working with here. Smaller size is going to benefit this one a little bit more contrast. Set it to 5. Hit OK. See what we get. Perfect. And then I'm going to go ahead and put that gradient map on top. So down to my adjustments layer, gradient map. Again, it's going to go over the whole thing at first, so don't let that freak you out. And then I'm just going to, oops, cancel. I need to get the value back for this guy. So I'm just going to eyedropper. Ooh. Eyedropper my blue background and copy this little hex value down here. And then go back up to my gradient map, double click on the white, paste that in, and then clipping mask it to this bottom layer. And now we're good to go. Again, if this is looking a little bit too dark and severe, I'm just going to go up to image adjustments, brightness, contrast. I know that this is not making it editable consistently, but I know that's kind of what I'm looking for. So I'm okay with that. Perfect. Again, save my work just to be sure. And then the final thing that I will show you guys for now, I would say at least in Photoshop, is going to be how to do gradient layers, how to add noise to everything, and then just how to add some fun other final touches. So one thing that I really like in collages is to lean into the sort of collage aesthetic of everything. Drag this really quickly down into the stickers. So I like to lean into that paper cutout kind of quality. So I'm just going to go in with my lasso selection tool and add in some funky little starbursts. This is just a selection, again, that I'm making with the lasso tool, the polygonal lasso tool. So as a good demonstration, this selection is not on any particular layer right now. So selections will hold as you're hopping around layers. So I'm just going to go ahead and make a new layer at the very top of everything. And then I'm going to go ahead and go in, let's grab like a fun, we'll do a primary color scheme, fun yellow, and we'll just fill that. And keep going with this. And these are pretty haphazard. I'm not really trying to be careful about where I'm putting these. It's meant to just look like a fun, kind of, again, paper cutout little explosion guy that's following the edges of some of these pairs. Maybe one of them exploded in the background or something like that. So I'm going to get way in here. I'm just zooming in with my trackpad, just so I can kind of follow the edges of some of the water droplets. And I guess it's sort of like, why would I be doing this? Just for a little bit of fun, just for a little extra visual interest, honestly. Sometimes there's just little extra things. If you feel like something's missing, just mess around with stuff until it feels right. Oops, I did that with the negative selection thing added. Go even quicker this time to not bore you guys to absolute tears. Yeah, and so it's like, why include these at all? Well, I just think they would be fun. So follow your heart on things like collages. It doesn't have to be super serious. Let's see. That's cute. That's cute. I'll add two more maybe. Things tend to work really well in art in odd numbers, weirdly enough. So let's do this, this, this. And I'm not, again, trying to be remotely perfect with how this is looking. I'm not being precious. I'm moving super quickly. That's the best possible recommendation I can give you guys for art stuff too, is to just like be zippy with it, have fun, don't take it super seriously. Maybe that sounds weird for someone whose job it is to like talk about art, to say not to take it seriously. But don't take it seriously. It's meant to be fun at this stage of things, so lean into it. And Photoshop really is great to embrace that kind of like adventurous, exploratory spirit. All right, fill this guy really quickly. Do, 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 do. And then We'll just even this out. Cute. Okay. Um, So what happens if you want to add an overall gradient? So we talked about gradient maps, which are just kind of doing these two color or as many colors as you want kind of treatments over things. What if you want to add a gradient over everything? Photoshop's gradient tools can be a little bit frustrating to me personally. You'll see this gradient tool right here. It's going to have really specific ways of working. It's going to be in lines, which can work for certain applications. If I wanted like a drop down gradient over this whole thing that I then like change the blend mode of or something. Fabulous. That's exactly what I wanted in that scenario. But sometimes you might not want that. So I like to also know how to manually create my gradients as a kind of we'll just talk about this video will be everything fun that you can kind of mess around with in Photoshop for collaging. So I'm going to make a new layer over here and I'm going to go to my brush tool and just grab a really gigantic brush. Again, I'm sizing things up or down with my brackets over here. I can go ahead and paint or fill this whole layer if I want to. And I'm going to make sure my brush is really, really soft. So I just went up to my brush tab up here and switched to a soft round. And now I can go in and start to really haphazardly, honestly, put down kind of blobs of color. If I was leaning into my primary color scheme, I can stick with that. But again, this is something that I'm not like being super, super precious with. I'm just going to place down some of these blobs. While I have my brush tool active, if I hold down Option, I can use a kind of color picker to go back in and adjust some of these until I'm getting the shapes and forms that I like. And right now, you might be saying this doesn't look like much at all or any kind of cool gradient. That's because there's one last step. So we're going to go into Filter, not our Smart Filter galleries. We're just going to go Filter, Blur, Gaussian, whatever that is, blur. And usually it's going to start really low on your radius. For gradients like this, you want to make it a really kind of large number. The higher you go on that slider, the more diffused your gradient is going to get. Then you can also sort of test out and see how it's looking. And again, the more you punch it, the more of that kind of amorphous gradient you're going to get. If I'm like, that looks cool, but I want a little bit more yellow in here, I can just cancel, go back in, pop that yellow where I think it might look nice, filter, blur, Gaussian. Again, mess with that until it turns into a gradient I enjoy. And then you can take that and use it over your blend modes and see how the image underneath reacts. Again, if this is looking a little bit too severe, I can notch up the opacity. You can see that I'm getting some sort of like unexpected color moments in some of these. You can just play around with it until you get something that you like. And again, you don't have to use any of these techniques if you don't want to. This one is not affecting much, but you get a couple of these like fun, punchier moments in the background, which I enjoy. The other thing we can talk about is how to add an entire like noise element over everything that you have going on. I'm also going to take these and drag them underneath stuff. And maybe I'll go in, select this, free transform it. We'll call that good. Deselect it and drag these under the stickers. Oops. I drag them into the stickers. Easy enough to get out. Apparently. There we go. Drag them under the stickers. Okay. So the next thing, if you want to add noise all over the top of an image, it might be really annoying to go layer by layer. I would just personally go in, add a new layer on top, make it a fill layer. You can pick any color for this. You can also just pick white. fill that layer. Oops, wrong layer. Fill that layer, go to filter, noise, add noise, notch it up to whatever degree you want for that noise, and then just change the blend mode of that layer. Now you can get noise over the entire thing. Instead, let's see, what else is there to cover? So noise over the entire thing, gradients. The last thing you might want to do is impose textures on top of stuff. So in some of my graphic design courses, I always like to show this as paper texture over posters, which is really popular. And again, you don't have to do any of this if you don't want to, but I'll just demonstrate it. This is all going to work with layer blend modes, of course. This is just an image that I have on hand of a crumpled up folded sheet of paper. It's fairly large, but not, obscenely. You can get something like this just by searching for paper texture online. Or if you're curious about where I get mine, feel free to ask and I'd be happy to send it to you. I'm just going to put that over top. Again, you're just going to change the blend mode. Some of these, depends on what you're going for, are going to work better than others. What you do want to make sure is that it's going over the entire thing. So you'll notice for some of these modes, maybe, bad example, but this text layer is not being affected by it. So you'll just want to make sure that it is going over your entire file. And then again, if it's too severe, just notch the opacity down a little bit. And then you can see how those paper textures look. Of course, you don't have to do something that's like uber crumpled and folded, but it can just add an extra little touch to whatever it is you're working on. If you're into that sort of like traditional collaged look. And again, you don't have to lean into that if you don't want to. So a lot of stuff that we covered, but filters briefly, and you don't have to pursue this halftone aesthetic if you don't want to. There are plenty more filters in the filter gallery to take a look at. How to create little fun shapes, how to add text if you would like, which again, not necessary. We have our gradients, we have groupings, all sorts of other stuff. So hopefully that covers a good amount of more playful things that you can do in Photoshop. Follow your hearts on this. If while you're out there getting sort of resources or images for your collages or getting inspiration, if you come across something that looks like it was done in Photoshop and you'd like to know how it was done, please just send it to me over email and I'd be more than happy to either record a little video walkthrough for you or explain it to you over Zoom or something like that. It's super fun for me to mess around in Photoshop, so I would be more than happy to show you guys how to create similar looking things that you're finding online. So feel free to send me any questions you guys have. Otherwise, this is kind of the last session for our collage assignment. That is going to be due on Thursday for you guys. If I didn't cover something that you're interested in, again, just let me know. More than happy to record a video for you guys, and I'll see you in the next one.